My name is Dominic Falder. I'm the president of the FCCT this year. It's very nice to see all these new faces in the club. If you haven't been to the FCCT before, we have one of the most open clubs in the whole of Bangkok. We have 800 members. We have people from every country, from Afghanistan to Zimbabwe, literally. And we're always looking for new members. If you come along, you get into these Wednesday night programs absolutely free. This is one of the big bonuses. And we do programs every Wednesday. We're probably the only press club in the world that maintains that, that routine. And as you all know, at the moment, we're in a very high news cycle in this part of the world, so there's an awful lot going on of interest. So we're actually laying on an extra program tomorrow to take in Dr. Mahathir's extraordinary second coming, the election in Malaysia, and what it means for the country. And we'll have Bridget Welsh, who's a US specialist in Malaysian politics, coming to us on Skype, and we'll have Phil Robertson here, and we're hoping to have Jonathan Head somehow, whether he's back here or Skyping in, we don't know, because he's busy trying to get Anwar Ibrahim to speak to him at the moment. And then to bring it back to Bangkok, next week on Wednesday we will be having a program on basically the dire press situation in the region, and we will have Umesh Pandey, the editor of the Bangkok Post until a few days ago. He'll be in here. Umesh is an old friend of the club, he's an old member of the board. And we're going to combine him with people from Cambodia, from the Phnom Penh Post, the Cambodia Daily, who've just been through this very traumatic business of seeing their newspapers basically collapsed by very underhand activities. And then at the end of the month, on the 30th, on the Wednesday, we will have the ambassador for the European Union, whose name eludes me, he's a Finnish guy, but he will be here to introduce himself. We have Italian writers on May the 31st, the day after that, presenting the books that they've been writing. And on Monday we have a documentary, We Are X, which is about a glam rock band from Japan. So that's what we do on Mondays. We have regular documentaries that you will not be able to see on cable TV or elsewhere. So I think that pretty much covers it for the moment. And so to this evening, where we are going to take a look at the great greenwashing debate and whether Thai businesses are taking sustainability seriously. And sustainability is being widely heralded as the cure-all solution to global environmental and social challenges. And Thai businesses are lining up to declare themselves sustainable, develop projects that support the UN Sustainable Development Goals, write sustainability reports, manufacture green products, and more. In some cases, these businesses are embracing sustainability to maintain a social license to operate in their communities. But in the worst case, they could be doing so to hide the true nature of their unscrupulous activities under a veil of responsibility to the greater good. Hard to believe that this could happen in Thailand, isn't it? Anyway, given these wide-ranging realities, where do most Thai businesses stand and where are they going? So I'd like to thank Editions Didier Millet for helping us organize this evening. They have produced a book in recent months, Thailand's Sustainable Business Guide. This is a guide to how to future-proof your business in the better world. It's extremely well produced, as all EDM books are, and we're going to be hearing from one of the key people in it on how well it's doing. So just to introduce you to who we have, we've got Sarinee Achavanuntakul, co-founder and member of the Editorial Board of ThaiPublica, and a co-founder of Sal Forest. Sarinee is an advocate of sustainable business growth and a highly visible and critical thought leader in this field. We have Krip Rojanastien, chairman of Chiva-Som International Health Resorts, who genuinely adopts a quadruple-bottom line in leading his sustainable business model. So we're going to be explaining that. And we have Anthony Watanabe, who's the Managing Director of Asia Clean Innovations, a cleantech business venture. And he works closely with investors and partners in Southeast Asia to promote the adoption of clean energy technologies. And finally, we have Bimsupa Kultanan, who is the editor of the book. And she's a former sustainability consultant who's part of, as I've said. So anyway, her background is not just in producing books. Right, so I thought we'd kick off with Kun Sarinee, who can paint a big picture of what's going on.
Okay. Hi, thank you. Hi everyone, nice to be here. So I only have 10 minutes, and I think we have a range of very experienced speakers, so I'll try to be short and just set the stage. So my company, right now, Sal Forest, we're a research company. So essentially we do research on sustainability issues, usually starting from areas of impact where businesses had mostly negative impact. So we've done work on supply chain, food supply chain, so deforestation in the north that is associated with the haze problem in Chiang Mai. And Nan, we have done some work on fish meal supply chain in Songkhla, and we went there because of overfishing problem, not so much, that was before slave labor was exposed. And then more recently, we've done some work on sustainable banking, trying to find what might be the business case for banks to adopt better risk management for environmental and social risk. So my background before, I guess this new life is 10 years in investment banking, so I kind of have a special interest in how banks can be more sustainable. So that's kind of more or less what we're doing. And more recently, we've been doing some research on business and human rights, which is a kind of an up and coming, and I think a relatively new topic that the government is placing emphasis on. So I'm going to start by saying that just trying to look at the topic, and the topic actually is a question, so I'll try to answer, right? So the question is, are Thai businesses serious about sustainability? So my overall, if I had to say something in short, I would say they think they are serious, right? So they think they are. I think that a lot of them really genuinely want to be serious about sustainability. The question is, are they really serious? And do they know enough about how much are they doing? Are they doing enough? I think a lot of businesses now, they have sustainability departments, which are kind of a newer version of the CSR departments. But I think in terms of practice, and I think there's going to be a lot more people who can talk about this, but the sustainability department, a lot of companies, basically their main job is producing sustainability reports and trying to get into the Dow Jones Sustainability Index, which is kind of now a sort of a gold standard for Thai business to be in. And so the thinking is that, well, if we get listed, under this Dow Jones Sustainability Index, that means we are a sustainable company. We can proudly now say that we are sustainable. So I think this is kind of where a lot of companies are at, while the CSR people continue to do the, I would say, in Thailand we have a word called after process CSR. So it's basically charity or activities that are not really related to the main core business. So I think that's kind of where we're at. So I think the challenge is, if you look around the world, a lot of companies that change, the practice to become more sustainable. I think there are kind of two camps. So one camp are companies that saw some risk already or face some impacts or some backlash from their business. Because when you say the word sustainability, the connotation is that something else is unsustainable, right? Because then there's always this dichotomy. So if I say, for example, sustainable business like say clean energy or organic, by implication I'm saying that, well, organic is better than non-organic, or clean energy is better than the traditional energy. So I think that that's a connotation that there's some unsustainable practice that has a lot of externalities and that cannot last. So I think one camp are the businesses who face this sort of already some risk to their business. In Thailand, one sector we were a bit involved in was this food supply chain. So as you know, we have some big haze problem in the north, and that haze was partly a result of a lot of maize growing. So maize is corn for animal feed, and because of the growing demand for animal feed, mostly thanks to India and China with growing population, so more and more trees are cut. in the north. And so I think before, more or less people kind of can tell that, oh, of course the big animal feed companies are the end buyers of those maize. But the challenge is that those companies don't really know the actual growers. They don't actually know the farmers, because the farmers will sell to the middlemen, and there are sometimes many different middlemen, before it gets to the feed mill, right? And so one of the first times that became an issue, and business think that is an issue, is one research we did, which we tried to look at actual supply chain in Nan province, which is where the sort of the watershed, the key watershed area of Thailand is. Nan River is like 40% of Chao Phraya River, so it's quite important. So we established from interviewing with middlemen who actually were the ultimate buyers. So we're able to calculate some market shares. And then we were able to establish some names and market shares, like how much CP was buying, how much Beta Grow was buying, Lee Patana feed mill. So we had names of the key players. And we also identified the Bank of Agriculture as a kind of a main financier to these loans. So I think that's one way that clearly when you name names, and business now feel that, okay, now they have to be involved. And they have to have better look at their, I guess, upstream supply chain. So this is a big challenge in Thailand, right? It's also similar in fisheries business, where I think we've been exposed and under a lot of attacks on slave labor issues. So the challenge is a lot of the seafood company, they're at the, or maybe midstream companies, they don't really know where the raw materials come from. They have no idea where the fishing boats were basically, and what kind of labor they employ. So this traceability of supply chain became an issue, and it's still a big challenge, and maybe we can discuss more about this. But so I think this way of change is pressure, so it's basically a push factor. So companies, now were seen clearly to be involved in some unsustainable practice, and so they were basically forced to change. In the fisheries example, this is directly, they have some direct complaints from the buyers. So people in, for example, big companies like Tesco or Walmart were actually saying that, hey, we have to suspend this purchase until you can prove that there's some progress on the slave labor. And I think those companies were pressured by their consumers in their countries. So I think that's how the push pressure, how that actually presses business to change. And of course, once they find ways to better improve their businesses, then they may see some opportunities, some new business opportunities along the line. But that's one camp. I think people like Krip is another camp. So Krip is, I think, one of the few visionaries we have in Thailand. So he actually has never been attacked, as far as I know, on anything, right? But he actually sees the opportunities. He sees the opportunities there. He understands. He sees, I think, I think he can talk I think there are a lot of fascinating details about Chiva-Som, so I urge you, we actually did a case study on his company a few years ago on an example as a green business in Thailand. So there are many amazing stories there, but I think basically he just, went after it. He said, I'm gonna handle my resources, and they try to manage water, and I think it just gets more and more ambitious. So I think that's a kind of a pull factor, it's kind of a vision. Basically this camp, fewer, I think, in Thailand, businesses like this who are driven by a vision of bettering themselves without outside pressures, and then seeing some business cases, seeing some cost savings along the way, as well as other environmental and social benefits like license to operate. So my company is mostly interested in how we can basically come up with better information so that companies can associate their practices with the actual status of, a lot of problems in Thailand have direct linkage with business, but I think they may not see it yet because I think there's a few reasons. For example, the government, I think regulation is also, or government direction is important. Some of you may know that government of Thailand, for example, after many years of supporting renewable energy, just recently announced that they will be suspending renewable energy purchase for the next 5 years. So they said, renewables have pushed prices up, and we have enough capacity, and so that led to a lot of direct impact on the solar operators, and so this is always going to be important. And at the same time, we still subsidize. The government subsidizes a lot of fossil fuels, and a lot of the externalities, like communities who were basically affected by big projects, still really don't have a way to air their grievance or get some compensation. So those cases in Thailand take a very long time. We had a landmark case in Kliti in Kanchanaburi, where basically it was river pollution essentially, and that was very clearly the result of the mill. But it took like 10-15 years before the court basically decided some remedy. And so that concept of pollution pays principle is still rarely enforced. I think in Thailand we still lack a lot of environmental tools and laws that would address this issue. So I think government direction is important, and we're still really not there yet. And also I think NGOs, which could be a force, NGOs could actually bring attention to business, because business, I think by and large, they may not even know what impact their businesses have, right? Because they're like experts on the business. They may not necessarily talk, frequently with the people downstream or their suppliers. But NGOs, I think in Thailand, a lot of them work at a very local level. So they kind of have their own little territory. So they look after this area. So I think there's opportunity for NGOs to create synergies among themselves, and I guess elevate some issues up to say, hey, this is actually now a sectoral issue, or we can have a better practice of certain industries. For example, mining is still, I think, quite problematic in Thailand, because many mining companies also aggressively go after critics using computer law, for example. So I think there are some ways we can better bring the actual impacts and the externalities to, if the government is not going to internalize it by law, then I think it's a job of media, NGOs, and maybe researchers like myself to connect the dots, so that businesses see that it's actually their business risk and it's in their interest to change. So I think one good thing about Thailand is that people are, if they care about face, so na bang, in Thailand we say thin face. So if something really, I think is a risk to their reputation, I think maybe that's enough for them to do something about it. So it's just a matter of connecting the dots and kind of convincing them why a real change is better. So it's far better than just doing their little CSR or producing reports that very few people read. Because I think the driver to produce these annual report is mostly the stock exchange, who says, hey, if you want to be world-class leader, you got to produce these reports. So they keep churning out reports, but it's not necessarily the stakeholders who read and make sense of it. So that's kind of my take on where we are, and so I look forward to other speakers. Thanks.
Hello, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for coming to listen to us talk about this issue, which I think is highly topical and necessary, because it really shows the amount of interest that we have in this issue going forward from now into the future. And if we were to look at the issue of our Thai businesses taking sustainability seriously, it comes down to the question of why they are doing it. As Kun Sarinee has explained, the different drivers that are pushing them to take it more seriously, and also how they're doing it. Are they doing it correctly, and how far they're taking it? And so the first point is the different drivers for companies. And the first that Kun Sarinee has mentioned about the risk aspect. If you don't act, the risk of not acting on these issues and crises is very costly to your reputation. And social media, the culture of Line, of Facebook, of fake news, everything that happens can easily destroy a company's reputation. So what you're doing is catching up to these issues to be sustainable, no matter what the cost. And at times that translates into very superficial attempts to address the issue instead of at the root cause. And the other aspect would be the peer pressure and the competition that's pushing companies. Now, this is a business as usual driver, but if companies do not innovate and do not compete to be sustainable, in some instances, you're going to fall behind. And it's this competitiveness and this drive that I think, from a lot of the interviews that I've conducted with the companies and executives for this book, it's some of the business as usual drivers that get companies to think about sustainability. Like, if I can give one example, there's a car manufacturing, auto parts manufacturing company that I spoke to. He said, we don't rely on government regulations or laws. We look to our customers. And these are the bigwigs like Toyota, Honda, Mitsubishi. And if they do not comply with their customers' customers' demands for safety and quality, then they lose that client base completely. And that, in essence, is basically sustainability for the fact of sustaining, for surviving in your company and keeping your business, no matter from the next family generation, or if you want to be a 100-year organization, you have to fight in the race, right? And if you look back at that quote, no man is an island, and you're a business with stakeholders with pressure. So if you are a small-scale supplier, like one company we spoke to is a quail eggs farm manufacturer, quail eggs farm producer. They have their big client, which is Miner International, Sizzler Foods. They started as a really tiny company with simple boilers and egg peelers and, you know, constricted amounts of space and staff. But when Miner came in and started imposing all of these requirements and regulations on them, at first they're like, whoa, we don't want to do this. What is this? We don't have the capacity to do it. But from that point onwards, they said they started to kind of understand the thinking of what it means to be sustainable, and they're quite grateful for that, to give them that higher quality, that higher standard of production, and that enabled them to get to new customers and a new consumer base. Now, aside from these drivers, which is, you know, the competition, the risk, we also have the leadership, right? That comes internally, and that's why I think, to look back on the book a little bit, it's very important for us as observers and stakeholders in this movement to understand that sustainability affects all aspects of an organization. It's not just environmentalism. It's not trying to suffocate businesses and saying, no, this is what you're doing is wrong. It's not a black and white picture, right? You have to look at companies as the part of their progress and trajectory of what they're trying to achieve with their sustainability practices. And so everything from corporate governance can be about sustainability, to creating a strategy, to managing your human resources well, to managing your supply chain, to looking at the way that you use your resources and understanding that these are limited. And all of these aspects come into play for companies when they consider what is the most essential issue of sustainability for them. And if you're a company that's looking at this, if you're new and you look at it and you say, oh, this is so much, how do we know what we're going to prioritize? And that's one of the key takeaways that I had when developing this book and the case studies we had, is that companies, you have to choose what is your priority in this field and in sustainability. Like there's one company, for instance, I spoke to, it's called Ticketmelon, is a startup, and he said the most important part of sustainability for him is the culture, and that's the organizational culture that will sustain the company over the long term, and that's the things that they focus on is people development. And to him, that's the most important, to create competitive advantage and to create a brand over other competitors. And I think it's these different lessons that we get from the different businesses and what they prioritize helps us understand the landscape of companies who are doing sustainability today, and also at the same time the motivations for them to be sustainable. And if it's purely for compliance reasons, as Sarinee has touched on, to report and just answer the DJSI, and this means we are sustainable, then those are very short-term indicators, and they will translate into short-term initiatives and practices that at the end can be interpreted as greenwashing. So ultimately, that in itself is not sustainable. If you're only looking at the short-term drivers of your business and looking at the profit, the bottom line by quarter, or if you have a leader that's only focused on meeting monthly targets and KPIs, that does not look at the long term, and which I think Krip is very good at looking at this long-term vision of sustainability, then at the end, you're going to end up with random CSR initiatives that don't really tie in with the rest of your corporate vision. So all of this to say that I think that for the key takeaways that I would have from developing this book was that companies you can group companies in different ways. You have the ones that, I have spoken to some that are like, we don't really understand what this is, so let's wait a few years before we talk to you. We haven't seen the results of it yet, and I appreciated that because it's quite honest. So you have those people who are still new to it. You have those who are in the middle, like, okay, I kind of get what you're saying. I see some of the benefits, but I don't have buy-in yet. And the buy-in is the most difficult part that I found from writing about these issues, is that they don't have buy-in from top-level management. And the third part would be, okay, this is what my vision is. This is what we're going to do. And this is how I'm going to lead my company and make all of my decisions. And that's ultimately the kind of continuum that we want to see companies move towards. And seeing their initiatives and practices from this perspective, this holistic picture, I think, helps you understand more clearly the seriousness of companies who are investing in sustainability and why they're doing it. And I think understanding that will help us better as stakeholders and observers hold them accountable for what they say they're going to do. Okay. Thank you.
Krip.
So ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to be in this distinguished company and engaged in such an interesting topic. As Kun Pim Supha said, sustainability is about all aspects of the business and the things that you do. I don't really understand anyone, who would say that sustainability is just a project or just a part of the company or part of their business, because sustainability is all about going the distance. It's about being relevant, to your clients, your community, your country, the world. And being relevant, to me, means that what you're doing, to the clients or to the public at large, to the world, are of benefit. You're offering values, to their everyday life. So not to adopt sustainability, it just doesn't make sense. I mean, if you're going into business and you don't intend to go the distance, as I said earlier, you're just in for a short term, and you want to make big bucks, and get out in 5 years. You could probably do that. You're a risk taker, gambler, or you don't really care about anyone else. You just want to fatten your pocketbook. You could do that. But once the pocketbook gets fattened, then what do you do with it? You're not sharing it with anyone. You're bound to share with someone. So whatever you do will affect other people in some way or other, right? Whether you do it consciously or not. Now, Chiva-Som is in wellness. If you're not familiar with it, we have a wellness resort in Hua Hin, about 3 hours from here. And when we began intending to deliver wellness to our clients, we believed that wellness for individuals was not possible without environmental wellness. You can't offer wellness to people and tell them, well, we're going to lead you through lifestyle transformation so you can be healthier, you can be illness-free, and then your environment is toxic. It doesn't make sense, right? So we started thinking about what would be, our guideline in doing the business. And we came across something that we call the quadruple-bottom line. I think we've heard triple bottom line, but ours is quadruple bottom line, which means number one, wellness for your stakeholders. Stakeholders meaning your guests, your staff, your shareholders, your business partners, your suppliers, whoever you're doing business with. Then after that, number two is environmental wellness, which is all about being energy efficient, being very conscious about how you're managing your waste, being caring about the ecosystem. Number 3, you look beyond the confines of the business to the local community around you, the people you're directly impacting every day, every hour. How do you keep them as well as possible? How do you keep their quality of life, you know, as viable as possible? And how do you give back to that community, you know, that you've impacted significantly by building your resort there? The last but not least, of course, is the business bottom line. Because without a healthy business bottom line, you don't have a business, and you don't really have a pursuit of sustainability. You're not sustainable. But in setting up quadruple bottom line for conducting the business, there must be something that we embrace, you know, at the higher level, at the macro level. Is not just your business, it's the world at large, because you will have a role in the world. You will have an impact in some way or other. We chose the United Nations 17 Sustainable Development Goals that was set in 2015. It's all about, you know, zero poverty, zero hunger, good health and well-being, gender equality, you know, sustainability, communities, cities, and so on. So, with the guiding principles in place, right, and the wider vision, you know, for the whole planet, we set about conducting Chiva-Som business. And I've been told that, you know, people don't know already what we're doing. I've given interviews, I've talked about this, but so I don't want to dwell too much on what we've done. But basically, what we've done is that right from the beginning, we have tried to minimize our ecological footprint. For instance, ever since we started, we treat our wastewater 100%. We never release wastewater out to the municipality pipes. They have never had the burden of treating our wastewater. And apart from that, once we've treated the water, we reuse it, feeding the fish in the lake and watering the plants, the trees, and so on. So, you know, coming back to the questions from business people about payback, and sort of what's in it, because it does cost something. It has an upfront investment. I usually use this example, you know, because what we did in saving the water, you know, using the same amount of water twice, we saved 120 cubic meters a day, costing around 1,400 baht. In a year, we're saving 500,000. So, no doubt, you know, whatever we put in, that water treatment system is paid back a long time ago. We got into solar 12 years ago for water heating. And immediately we saved 50% of LPG used to heat water, and maybe 20% more electricity, because once you've heated the water, you have to keep it warm, right? And some electricity is used. But that, compared to using regular electricity, you've saved about 20%. So all this has happened, you know, within the confines of our resort. But once you have done it, you've embarked on this pursuit of sustainability, you cannot keep still. You know, it's just like anything else. Constant innovation is key. You don't keep still. So since then, we've had energy audits. We've had professionals come in. 5 years ago, there was a group called Clinton Climate Initiative. We commissioned them to do the energy audit of the entire resort. And they came up with some very bold proposition. They said that you need to change your chiller system. That means your entire, aircon system. That would cost, I don't know, it was over 10 million baht. And you need to change your bulbs to LED. This was 5 years back. I said, okay, so that's quite a high up front. So can you show me something about payback? He says, look, you're going to save 26% of your electricity consumption. And if you didn't do that, we would make up the difference. So we made the decision. We changed the chiller system. I think we had an air cool, and then we changed to water cooled. And we did find that we saved 26% of electricity consumption. So our electricity bill, instead of going steadily up like that, it's sort of flatlining. Because after that, not so long, the government announced a price increase of electricity. It went up significantly. So instead of having it climb, it sort of went like that. Didn't quite decline, but it just flatlined. So, in a world where energy sources are fast diminishing, cost of energy is rising all the time, a businessman would be out of his mind not to think about saving energy consumption, because that's something that's beyond his control. The government says the price is going up, it's going up. There's nothing he can do. We didn't stop there, because right now we're going through what they call it level 2 energy audit. We're doing it again. And I was having a chat with Anthony about how to track, how to monitor energy consumption in the resort. Because right now we're going with a manual system. We have 70 meters installed resort-wide. And every day someone will go and look at the numbers to see how much electricity each area of the resort is being consumed. He says he has a digital system. We will discuss it later, right? If a digital system can be real time, can be that responsive, we are interested. Now that all the initiatives that we have taken within the resort, that's an internal challenge, to keep going, to keep bringing in fresh ideas, to do even better. Externally, when we talk about the community, how do we go about convincing other people, other businesses, to jump on the bandwagon? People always suspect when a businessman stands up and says, let's do this, let's do that for the community. They said there must be an ulterior motive. He must be doing something to get something out of this, right? So there's no other way of doing it but to earn trust as you go. You have to earn the trust of the local community. You have no ulterior motive, and it's all about community. And we set up a movement called Preserve Hua Hin. That was 14 or 15 years ago. And we engaged the local inhabitants constantly, whether it's about beach cleaning, waste management, and so on. But the latest effort that we've made is to reforest a mangrove forest right in the middle of Hua Hin, on a piece of land of about 18 rai. I think commercial value must be around $15 million. But we struck a deal with the Wat, the temple, who owns the land, to allow us to go in there to grow and keep managing it on an unlimited basis. There's no term of the agreement. So we are looking after this forest in the middle of Hua Hin, where we've grown 3,000 trees. And there are countless species of fish, birds, and land animals flourishing and thriving there. And we believe that it will become one day an educational center for the local inhabitants, school children, understanding the ecosystem, learning how to live with it, understanding how fragile it is. Whether they do anything about it or not, at least they have the fundamental understanding. And each year we take in about 30 to 50 school children into this forest, have them view the ecosystem under the guidance of trained professionals. They go back to their home, their neighborhood, to practice sustainability. It's usually about waste management is the fundamental. And we go and evaluate each one of them, how well they're doing. And for the one that demonstrates, the clearest leadership, which means, getting not just their own family, but the entire neighborhood on board. We select, I think, 3 of them, and then I think set up scholarship funds, to fund their education, and so on. So this is an ongoing effort. We've done it now for 8 or 9 years in a row, and we're still doing it. So that's earning the trust of the community and engaging with the community. But what is the model, for other areas, other cities, other provinces? I would submit that the collaboration between the public and the private sectors is key, because neither one can do by themselves. We as private sector initiating something, naturally the local government has to give the blessings. The province has to give their blessings. They have to acknowledge it, support it. So I think that model of public-private sector collaboration would be something that's worth considering, for other areas of the country. Once you've got the initiatives, the way of life, going in your business, in your resort, and the community around you. As Kun Pim Supha says, it's all aspects of the business. So what sort of plan do you have? What sort of plan do you have for your business? Sustainability has to be embedded in your business plan. So what we have done, considering that, is that we are placing quality above scale. At Chiva-Som, it's we think that exceeding expectations, with a small operation, being highly personalized, highly dedicated to our guests, is preferable to being large and just meeting expectations. So we've set that as one of our basic tenets in doing business. So there's never going to be more than, say, 6 Chiva-Soms around the world. And we also believe that by going quality above scale, if you talk about risk management, it's not over leveraging, not taking undue risks, and making sure that you're a long-term player rather than a short-term one. So the challenges that we face, I would just like to leave everyone with this thought that it never stops, right? I've got with me here is a water bottle that we put into the guest room. Every accommodation room in Chiva-Som has this bottle of fresh water for the guests. Now it looks very colorful, but what happened before this was that we had plastic water bottles in the room, and we thought we would get rid of the plastic. And we commissioned local schools on the design work, organizing a competition. So local school children came up with their design, and we selected this one, this very aptly, as mangroves on it. And we put it on the cover. But then, once we've done this, the plastic bottles are gone. We're looking at this, And this material is Tetra Pak. And in Tetra Pak, I think everyone knows there's plastic. You need plastic to keep the water in there. You cannot have just cardboard. Doesn't work, right? There's plastic, there's aluminium. And the questions arise, what do you do with it? What are we going to do about that in the long term? We're thinking of moving to glass. When you want to move to glass, question pops up, you know, any businessman faces the same question. How much is a bottling plant? Right? How much space is it going to take? Because our resort is full. You know, where are we going to put it? And then, how do you get HACCP? There's hazard analysis critical control point to make sure it has the sufficient level of hygiene for the guests. So HACCP has to be attained for this. We have HACCP in the resort, but in the new plan to be set up, if it was to be at another location, we also have to qualify for that. So trained personnel is also needed, not just the equipment and the space and the funds. But we will go ahead because we believe it's the best for the guests, best for ourselves. It is more sustainable for us and the world. So to close, I agree with all our speakers here that sustainability is in all aspects of the business, in all aspects of your life. Right? It's not something that to hesitate over. It's something that we have to do, and quickly, because we are running out of time. You know, the world is so small now, and we're going to have, 9 billion people in 2050. Out of the 9 billion, 1 out of 5 is going to be 65 years old or over. You know, we have limited space, limited green area. We're going to have 9 billion people to feed, plus about 2 billion people who are 65 years old or over, who could be sick, not well. It just looks pretty bleak. If we don't do anything now, our children and grandchildren are going to suffer. It's a very real problem we are facing. I'm sometimes very upset when I see political conflicts, religious conflicts, ethnic conflicts. This is so small compared to the crisis that we're facing. You know, but feeding ourselves and keeping and surviving is not just business survival now, it's survival of mankind, our planet. So I leave you with this thought that there's really no choice. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. There is a charm and a challenge to being the last speaker on the bill. The challenge is, you know, half of your slides have now been covered much more competently by your fellow panelists, so you can just skip right through them. I will be doing that. The charm, however, is that you are in a privileged position to respond to some of the great ideas put forward. So I will do my best to do some of that as well. I'd like to start by thanking Kun Bimsupa, who invited me to participate on this panel this evening. So thank you so much, Pink. It's very much a pleasure to be here. And the second thing I'd like to do is, you know, this is a great room, and it's quite a full room, and I really hope you're having dinner. I haven't had any food since about 11 o'clock, so I'm smelling it, I'm hearing it, and I'm anticipating it after the session. I'd like to know who's in the room, and just maybe a quick survey. Do you come from policy or government? Can you raise your hand, please? The NGO, well, I see 1 or 2. The NGO sector? Okay. We got maybe 3. What about academia or education? There's about maybe 4 there. What about donors or multilateral institutions? 1, 2. The last group on my category is business. Wow, okay. All right, the vast majority. Okay, great. Thanks so much. It's always interesting to see who will attend a session like this, and I have to say I'm encouraged that it's a majority of private sector folks who are interested to learn from deep practitioners like Krip to see what they can apply in their own work. Yes, sustainability in every aspect of every business. I'm going to say something that's maybe a little bit radical, which is that every business is on the path to sustainability, whether they know it or not. And I'll break that down for you a little bit later, but I do believe that. And I'll give you just one quick anecdote that kind of illustrates it for me. I stepped into this space in Canada in 2001. I didn't know what sustainability was, and I basically never looked back. So since that time, this has been where I spend my working days, specifically around the business side, specifically around innovation. And my father-in-law is a now retired, but conservative Dutch manufacturer. And he's celebrating his 80th birthday next month. So this was about, I don't know, maybe 10, 12 years ago at quite the later part of his career, actually, on the verge of retirement. And he was, what is this sustainability? And I broke it down and I said, well, it's about using your resources efficiently. It's about treating your employees well. It's about maintaining your reporting to government and your accounting practices and so on, and fuel and so on. Well, that's just business. That's just good business. That was his response. And I said, you're right. It is. It actually is just good business. So that's from 10, 12 years ago. And of course, today, the world has changed. There are stock exchanges pushing for it. There are citizens and consumers crying out for it. We've really come a long way since then. And yet, as we hear, there is a lot of work, nonetheless, still to be done. How's that for a preamble? Okay. Today, this company of mine, Asia Clean Innovations, which is a Thai company, has two branches. Really, the first branch is focused on technology, and that's the innovation side. Technologies in energy and air and water coming from the West, many from Canada, where I come from, and finding opportunities, partners, customers, and markets in Southeast Asia. So for instance, our newest technology is Orcan air purifiers, which are manufactured in Quebec, the French part of Canada, and in China. And these are to improve indoor air quality. And it's a new addition to our portfolio, and we're quite excited about it. We've had our first shipment here in Bangkok, a few in Manila, and soon in Vietnam. The second area is something I think I'm going to focus on today because it relates to our focus on broader sustainable business practices, and that is we've been working with brands, specifically in this case garment brands on the supply chain. So Pink, you talked about the supply chain side of things, and I think it is a driver for action to green up and better manage energy and water in factories and in the supply chain. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. This is the slide I'm going to skip because it touches every part of the business, and it can enhance, it can help, can sometimes hinder if not done appropriately or ignored rather, but definitely adds value at every stage of every organization. A quick little bit about some of the drivers, and here's where I think I have some interesting responses. The Stock Exchange of Thailand actually in 2017 was ranked 10th out of 55 stock exchanges around the world in terms of its promotion and driving its listed companies to disclose their sustainability impacts. And that was as done by Corporate Knights out of Canada, in fact. So they've come a long way set in doing this. And although I agree that there's an industry of consulting to write sustainability reports, and I did some of that back in Canada back in the day as well, and I do think there's a churn and there's a bit of a race. What I have seen up front is that move of public disclosure and that mandatory disclosure does drive impact down into the supply chain. So for instance, some of the multinational garment brands we've been working with, they're a part of this. They're a part of reporting, mandatory reporting to a whole range of stakeholders, including shareholders. And what's happening is, they could be based in the US or in Western Europe, but Southeast Asia is where that strategy lives or dies. it happens here or it doesn't happen here, because their scope 1 emissions they can manage, but when it gets into scope 2 and scope 3, that is where the big challenge is. And I can tell you from having been on the factory floor, those are very significant challenges. In Canada, I used to help write strategies for the companies, and here we're actually in the guts with the suppliers, and I think that's frankly where the real action is and where the excitement is. So there is a bit of a churn in the reporting kind of industry, but there is also a driver for real benefits on the ground. This is another sort of very high level, the task force on climate disclosure, which is being chaired by Michael Bloomberg and has Mark Carney as kind of its champion, and is a big deal at trying to drive consistent and comparable climate risk data. The Sustainable Development Goals were already mentioned. I think they're providing a great framework for companies to align on and drive forward in making progress. And it's giving some structure and I think some kind of global alignment to what this looks like when they want to put some of these things into action. Now, admittedly, a lot of this is focused on big business, and that's great. There's a role for that. There are big impacts, and as I say, there are kind of downstream or upstream rather in the supply chain benefits to this kind of approach. But it doesn't necessarily speak to the Chiva-Soms of the world or some of the medium-sized enterprises. And like many economies, they tend to be the backbone of job creation and economic development. So this slide was up erroneously before, but this is kind of what I meant when I said every company is on the path to sustainability, even if they do not know it. So compliance is kind of the first piece. There are laws in place, and complying with those laws, whether it's labor practices or taxes or environmental impacts, that's the first step. Now, it's not the exciting step. It's not where I've spent a lot of my time over the past years, but it is a step in the process. Efficiency is, I think, where the majority of companies are today, if we look at across the board, and that is really, as you said, Krip, looking at saving energy, using it more wisely and efficiently, so you're mitigating risks of cost increases down the road, watching waste if you're paying levies to discharge waste, this kind of thing, your raw materials, being efficient with those. So all of that makes perfect sense. And frankly, there's still a ton of work to be done here, and there's strong business case in place for resource efficiency. That is, I think, clear and present, and we're seeing it not only in Thailand, but here in the region. Innovation, I think, is where things get really exciting, and that's when companies decide that either business models change or new products or services come to life that are addressing some of the consumer needs, societal challenges, forthcoming kind of trends. And here in Thailand, I was thinking about this. I think there are some great opportunities and some things already afoot. So for instance, recently there was something launched called the ASEAN Sustainable Smart Cities Network. And for Thailand, we've identified 2 cities here, Chonburi and Phuket. And I was actually at a smart cities mission with the Canadian Embassy about a year and a half ago in Phuket. And so a number of the countries in the region have identified a few different cities to be sort of pilots, but we have already 2 here in Thailand. And so developing products and services to fit into what is still a nebulous idea, what exactly is a smart city, but that is now more than a trend. That is a movement, and that is coming. And I think apart from Singapore, we have seen very few limited examples of real smart city infrastructure solutions. So there's a whole world of opportunity there. Under Thailand 4.0, with a focus on, say, waste to energy, bioenergy and biomass, there's a whole other opportunity under this innovation banner. Energy storage is a big play for Thailand, especially with the oncoming momentum around electric vehicles. We have a growing consumer demand, a strong middle class that's looking at things like social enterprise and social good. And I think the Thai consumer is more aware than some of our neighboring country counterparts of the sustainable, the environmental and social impacts of their consumption. And then regional competition, which Ping talked about, I think it's key. If I think of just like the garment sector, so Thailand had a garment manufacturing, has still in fact, because we're working with some groups here. But then Vietnam is now a huge base for the region. My luggage is there. I've just flown back from Vietnam earlier this afternoon, and Vietnam is also facing some challenges. So there's a lot of garment manufacturing happening in Cambodia, but Cambodia is also facing challenges because Myanmar has opened up. So all of this also drives the need to look at resource efficiency, to be serving your customers well with more sustainable products that they can fit into their overall global strategies. And you see that that's one whole other set of drivers, is this kind of regional competition, which we're seeing, I think, loud and clear in Thailand. So innovation, and I'd love to hear, what this means to you in your work when we think of that innovation banner. I think that's where we want to get everybody to. So yes, they're on the path, but compliance is, sort of 0-1. It's not the exciting piece. It's a little bit less than basic, let's say. And innovation is where things get really exciting. And I'd love to hear some examples of that from folks in the room, and I know that there are some examples. I just share this as a closing slide because this is what we're up against. So I typically stay at Accor hotels when I travel, because Accor has a great environmental platform called Planet 21, and it's a very strong and robust platform. And it'll typically be a Novotel if it's my budget, and maybe a Sofitel if it's somebody else's budget. And of course, like many hotels, they have the key system, right? So the electricity in the room doesn't work unless you in the room when you put the key in. Yesterday, after a day of productive meetings, I come back to my hotel room, and this was in my key slot, right? So this is a SIM card leftover, or packaging, I guess you can say. And I'm sure housekeeping staff thought they were doing me a favor, so the room was pre-chilled as I arrived. For how many hours, I do not know, but everything was on, lights, air conditioning, and this was there. And I'm sure that there's, and I love Accor. I'm a supporter. I have my loyalty points, so there's nothing against that. This is what we're up against. You can have a great program, and I'm sure very good training, and still, as humans, we're going to find some kind of workaround. And this is, as I say, a recent, slightly humorous, but I think very telling case of the nature of the challenge before us, complex and wonderful as it is. So with that, I'll close and bring it over to discussion.
Good, thank you. Right, well, as usual, we have a microphone in the middle of the room, so if you want to ask a question, get up there and make yourself visible to me. We have people running.
Hi, the name's Peter Trainer. I'm a photographer and a transport planning consultant. I understand that most of your comments tonight have been related to business, but do you think that business has some responsibility to put pressure on government or NGOs to improve the education system so that the consumers are aware of what the businesses are doing and are aware of sustainability? Just picking up on your very last example there, the cleaning staff put the cards in because they think they're doing you a favour. They're not thinking about sustainability. They don't understand why the lights are not and the air conditioners are not on all the time, because they don't have the education. Nobody's told them about sustainability. Nobody's told them about conserving energy. They just don't know. So a lot of consumers, the supermarket girl at the checkout who puts your groceries into 2 carrier bags instead of 1, isn't thinking about the plastic's not degradable and it's going to be there for 1,000 years. The food seller who uses 2 styrofoam trays instead of 1 is not thinking about sustainability. They're just thinking about giving you your dinner. So in my opinion, the education is important, but the education isn't there, and there's no incentive for anybody to put it there unless an incentive is applied, unless the government isn't going to do it because they're not concerned enough about it and they don't see the benefits of it yet. So does the panel think that some pressure should be put on governments or NGOs to improve the education at the bottom level so that the farmer, the villager, the checkout girl is conscious of sustainability and like happens in Europe, the consumer puts pressure on the manufacturer to cut down on the amount of packaging or the amount of waste that's involved. So the pressure comes from the bottom up as well as from the top down, but you need some education to do that. So do you think that the business should apply some of that pressure to improve the education?
Right. Sarinee, would you like to?
I think there are several answers, maybe. I think a lot of businesses are educating their own consumers because, I mean, I think, for example, one of the SDGs, right, I think number 12, it's about sustainable consumption as part of sustainable production. So it's not enough to have sustainable production. The consumption must also be more sustainable. So we have companies like Levi's, for example, who have, you know, with their CEOs coming out, hey, everybody stop washing your jeans, you know. And so you do, I think we do have increasing efforts. And I think Unilever is one example of a company that's really putting a lot of effort into changing consumer behavior. So I think there is a lot of role that businesses can play. But I think it also depends on how urgent the issue is. So for example, looking at Thailand, we have, I think, a number of, I would say, real, you know, pressing issues for us. For example, we are like number 5 or 6 plastic waste, I mean, in the ocean in the world. So depending on which research you read, we are either number 5th or number 6th, which is quite, you know, high ranking. So I think there's a very clear policy, I mean, answer, which is just, you know, just to internalize that, right? Just to put a tax on plastic or put a cost to it, like a lot of other countries have done. So I think this is something that businesses can do in terms of like getting the government to do it, because of course there's going to be some arbitrage situation if one company does it and nobody else is doing it. But I think that's going to be clear rationale for issues that are really, I think, you know, what should be our priority, so to speak, because I mean, plastic in the ocean is a big problem right now, right? So even whales, I mean, they cannot really survive, and in microplastic, for example. So I think that it also depends on what kind of issues. And yes, I think in Thailand, there are good examples of, I think, isolated companies, so different companies doing very great things. But I think in a way, sometimes it feels like they're kind of competing with themselves, you know? They're sort of far ahead of everybody else. And there's not enough this kind of concerted effort to I guess, lobby the government to do the right thing. I have an example. I'm not sure if I can, I guess, say the company name, just to be on the safe side. You can probably guess who it is, but there's a big multinational company here in Thailand who have been trying to get the regulator of Consumer Protection Bureau to change the packaging size. So their take is that the packaging is way too big. You know, if you look at snacks, for example, it's really, the actual snacks is so small, right? But the bag is huge. It's, I guess, psychology, because people want to see big bags. And they told me that in other countries, they have done it themselves. Like, they actually reduce the packaging, and they can actually communicate that to consumers of, you know, what the benefit of that. And the consumers buy it because they're more environmentally conscious, I guess. But that doesn't work in Thailand. So what they try to do is to get this government, consumer protection, to push it out as a regulation so that everybody has to do it, you know. And actually they came very close doing it, but then they told me the director changed and so the whole thing fell apart. So I think that also depends on, you know, a number of different factors. So, but I do think that there's a value of businesses coming together to, you know, to lobby or to advocate for government regulation on issues that are, I think, have very clear public benefits, and where it's going to establish a fair playing field, right? And no kind of arbitrage or advantage to anyone. So,
Krip, would you like to add to that? This idea, do companies have this obligation to go out and educate people? You seem to be very
It's
active.
an interesting view to have businesses pressure the government. Usually when businesses do that, through their lobbyists or whatever, is for other purposes. But you know, for energy saving, efficiency and so on, I guess it's conceivable. But you know, really politically speaking, the people who could best pressure the government is the people. You know, the citizens, the people who vote those people into power. And perhaps we should start with the education and the curriculum that we have today. You know, why not, you know, more emphasis on the ecosystem, the sustainable way of life? Why not, you know, introduce that into the curriculum? At least the fundamentals. And then people will have an awareness, whether they practice or not, whether they're going to, you know, do something about it or not. They have a basic understanding. So when they're old enough to go to the poll, they can make the right choice. And that's what determines, you know, the kind of government you're going to have. You know, how responsive they should be, you know, to sustainability, to the long-term vision about, you know, the planet Earth. I think the politicians are just very busy with, you know, their own agenda. And I think it starts more with people. Business can do something, and you know, as I said earlier, the public-private sector collaboration, and then we could encourage that, you know, from the provincial level up. And when you have that sort of activity going, the state officials realizing that there is something viable in this is what people like, the politicians realizing it could be a useful initiative, and businesses should do it instead of lobbying for, you know, something else, contracts or whatever. But really, you start with the individual at a very early age. I think that would be the best way, which means we should upgrade our education system.
But that was the point that I was making, that business should put pressure on the government to introduce it into the education system.
Yeah, I agree.
Right now that pressure's not there. There's no incentive for the government to do it because no one's putting pressure on them, because people aren't aware of it. They're not conscious of the problem. But business is conscious of the problem, so I just thought that maybe they should take the lead.
I think this is conceivable, and it's a very interesting idea, and we, you know, we are doing it. But what we need to do, businesses need to get together, you know, to have a critical mass, you know, because when you negotiate with the government, critical mass is key, right? How much, you know, influence, how much strength you have behind you. I think the first thing that businesses should do, should form some sort of an alliance. I don't know what you could call it, you know, sustainability alliance or what, and then talk with one voice to be listened to by the government. Yes.
Right. Particularly as we're all waiting for a new government.
Does it work? Great. I really like this last question, so I'm glad that you took this time to reply, because every time I go to Thailand at 7-Eleven, let's say, you take 3 bags and you say no plastic, no straws, no, they look at you as if you were crazy. So I think that's a very important point of education. I'm Nicole De Paula. I'm the Executive Director of Global Health Asia Institute. It's a think tank working on environmental sustainability and health, hosted by Mahidol University. My question to the panel is, what do you think in terms of the business? They are conscious, not all of them, but those who are, they sometimes don't know how to start. And as you were mentioning with the book, they simply don't know. But do you think that sustainability deserves a department, for example? The problem that I see is that even if you have a sustainability department, this department is usually disconnected to the decision makers. And probably that's not what we have. When companies are advising companies what to do, maybe, I don't have the solution, but I would like to hear from the panel, what would be the best solution right now that we know that would put these people working on sustainability, whatever that is, you know, it involves beyond environment, but it would also have a voice. So thank you.
Who feels like taking that? Ping?
Hi, thank you for your question, and I can say from my experience with consulting that is in fact a very real problem, and for sustainability departments, they feel stuck because they feel that all they do is reporting and responding to the DJSI, and then everything is a challenge to get the buy-in from their executives. So that in itself means that sustainability is not a priority. But one of the interesting companies that I spoke to when I interviewed this book was IKEA. And he said, the director of sustainability, he said in the future, IKEA will not have a sustainability department, because that is the future, because it needs to be embedded in everyone's thinking. There's not the point if you just make sustainability an issue, you make that a niche thing that everyone is not aware of. So if this is a priority for sustainability, and then it's the sustainability department that has to go around trying to convince other departments to care about these issues, then that in itself is not sustainable. And I think the three ways to address that would be to first get it into management thinking, get it into strategy all the way from the leadership. And if you have that at the top, it's much easier. And there's a difference in the companies that I've seen. For companies that don't have that buy-in and companies that do, things get done much faster. And it was easier for me too, for our job. Because like, okay, you get it. It's not hard, it's not gonna get stuck. And the second part, to get sustainability departments talking, is to get them engaged with different departments on a regular basis. Now, for instance, risk management. Risk management, you're not really looking at sustainability risks that are long-term, like climate change or demographic changes. You're looking at a shorter time frame to see if I can manage my company to meet my objectives in this given time frame. You're not looking at issues like climate change that are gonna manifest over 20 years and then say, okay, why are we gonna develop a plan that's 20 years long, But the key is that you have to keep getting a sustainability department working with risk management, or at least get them to sit with each other in the same committee, so that you start having this dialogue within the companies themselves, and that way you can steadily break down the silos. And I think that's slowly happening, but not too much. And because companies right now, what they're starting with, they think the way to start is to form a sustainability department, so that kind of sets it back.
When you talk about sustainability, you can look at it from the opposite side, from a Malthusian point of view, and that is, instead of trying to always keep up and have your expanding populations and teeter on the verge of disaster basically forever, if you look like a country like Bangladesh is completely unsustainable. Do you see a more conservative tactic, population control, being an essential element as part of your scheme? You mentioned, Krip, you mentioned population quite specifically in your presentation.
Yeah, it's the population crisis is on us right now. Thailand is already classified as an aging society. I think that that stats, of 2050, 1 out of 5 in the world, we're going to get hit with it sooner than that. I think the estimate now is 2035, something like that. 1 out of 4 Thais are going to be 65 or over. That's a serious scenario, all right? And one thing that we know is that if we don't keep those senior population in good shape, we're going to have a huge healthcare bill that no GDP is going to be able to cover. Okay, and the other idea is that why do you retire at 60? Why do you even retire at 70? When at 60 nowadays, still young, still vital. We have the people in our company. I think our company retirement age is 55. It was set way back, but we have people way over 55. Some of them are sitting in here, still working. I mean, it's. I'm 67. I don't see, it seems to me a waste, to put these people into retirement homes, or to put them into nice condos, and just keep them there, and think that they could live well, and enjoy, the twilight years, or whatever you call it, right? It's a social issue, economic issue that is going to hit us very hard if we don't, take a long-term vision. It doesn't have to be a long-term, it's medium-term vision, 5 years, 10 years. What do we do with these people? We're in the wellness business, so we kind of have some understanding of how to keep people from getting sick, chronically ill, and hence, fairly low maintenance. Someone who is sick with chronic disease probably costs 5 to 10 times more than someone who just requires a yearly checkup. Right? So economically, socially, we have huge, massive problems that we got to tackle right now. But coming back to sustainability department, we do have a sustainability department. Chiva-Som is our sustainability manager sitting there. But really, his job is not to be just kind of in the corner and thinking about projects to do every year or every quarter or whatever. His job is more to be coordinating with all the departments who are coming up with their own initiatives of how to save energy, because why is, I think Kun Pim Suhai is right, it's a top-down approach, because when we set the KPI, I said that energy saving has X score, and suddenly you will see department heads, having meetings with the staff, how we're going to cut down electricity consumption. There's this meter sitting in our spa, in our gym, how are we going to keep it from going up, or below the level they set? And they start to have these discussions, and they come up with initiatives. They switch off the lights when you're not there, when the clients are not there. Some of them will turn off the tap when they're cleaning their teeth. Save water.
Right, Anthony, did you want to follow on?
Yeah, that's it right there. It's got to be a top-down strategy. There will be a small percentage of any community that cares about it just intrinsically and lives their life that way, so they'll work that way. But it's got to be in the KPIs. It's very simple. Ultimately, we're motivated by self-interest. So you either give people a penalty or a reward for the behavior you want to drive. And so KPIs right from the CEO all the way down to the line staff is the way, aligned in a strategy, is the way to get it forward. Interface, a number of years ago, one of the leading sustainable corporations, they were adamant that they didn't have a sustainability title in anybody in the company. And then in Canada, they hired a sustainability manager, fantastic woman. And I think today there is still value in having a coordinating department that must absolutely embed and work with all the different groups and the different departments, but is somehow a coordinating factor. But it's not enough, otherwise you're fighting the battles that Pink mentioned. So you've got to make it into the performance of all of the different levels of a company, aligned with a strategy, and then I think you have the potential for impact.
Good. Right, question.
Yeah, hi. Thanks again for hosting this. This has been really insightful for us. I represent Green International. I'm one of the founding members of the first ever student-centered NGO, meaning that some of my staff members here, everything from the invitation to this place to our new partnership with the UN and the TEI and others has been done by students. And I'm really thankful for the first questioner's idea of education, because we really believe it's crucial. So building off that same idea, I believe that a market is only as good as the community that it belongs to. If a community doesn't really value bananas wrapped in plastic bags at 7-Eleven or elsewhere, then they won't see a problem in addressing it to get fixed. And 7-Eleven won't make a claim to get it fixed because it might cost them profits, because if they go through a change like that. So just like with the key card thing, it's the same general idea. So regarding education, as we know, the Europeans, including Sweden, Switzerland, France, and now the UK with straws being banned by the end of the year, they do it because their education is very progressive. Their education is very forward-thinking, and everyone knows the impact, not just individually, but communally, that everybody's having. Countries like Rwanda and Paul Kagame, they made these changes swiftly with his authority. So there are more than one way to get disposable plastics banned. I want to ask the panel, what way do you think, based on the current situation in Thailand, because this is no joke, as Krip was saying, this is something we need to address now. So what can Thailand do urgently to follow in the footsteps of one of the 25 countries that have completely banned disposable plastics?
So 25 countries have banned these plastics. How can Thailand get to that point? Is it likely? By the way, the FCCT has a policy, we're not giving out straws anymore, and they will be removed. One time use, no, you're not supposed to get it, so we're training people. But we're actually doing it here, so people do take note. What can Thailand do? I think you flummoxed them with a question.
That's a very tough question, but I am actually personally trying to do something about this, and it's very hard. So the other day I went to a restaurant, and then I was getting takeout food, and I brought my own Tupperware. And they were really surprised, and it's like, what do you want us to do? I would like you to put my takeout food in this Tupperware because I don't know what type of packaging you have, and not give me any straws. And they're like, oh, okay, no straws. So it's little things like that that I'm trying to do, and trying to get everyone to separate the trash, all of my friends around me. And it's quite hard, and I think as a consumer in this generation, in this environment, it comes down to convenience and alternatives. And the convenience is still such a big factor here that I think it makes it difficult for you to transition if companies do not give you an alternative. If consumers are like, oh, okay, there's no alternative, and bringing my own plastic bag is too much of a hassle, you know, what, I'm gonna take the plastic bag, because the thought is there that it's still a convenience and a luxury to be investing in these issues in the face of the lack of an alternative choice. And that's where I think businesses should come in. And I absolutely agree with the first question as well, that I think businesses need to take action on government and on policy. But the political climate here is, I feel, too unsteady, and it depends on the issue, as Kun Sarinee mentioned, that is not a priority on the top of the government's list. And the collaborations that are happening right now, you know, the different Prachaniyom, Pracharat, all of these policies, they're not addressing issues like this yet. So if you're looking at, you know, supporting farmers, yes, those are all good initiatives, but it's not looking at core education on sustainability and on the environmental well-being. And I think that's, okay, please go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, just something a bit to add. I think it's a little bit sensitive also because plastic bags in Thailand, so I think the vast majority is thung khao keng, you know. So when Thai people go buy lunch, it's, you know, like 3 layers of plastic, so basically. So your curry is going to be in one plastic bag, right? And it's going to be in 2 other layers of plastic bag. And so this, like the inner layer plastic bag with the curry in it is a kind of mainstay. More or less, that's what our lunch food looks like, you know, for so long. So that's why it's really ingrained in a way in the kind of everyday life. So I believe in the alternative, because why is it sensitive? Because as soon as you say, okay, let's ban all plastic, so you say, okay, let's bring our own Tupperware, immediately you can be at risk of being labeled, you know, someone who's heartless, you know, or like you don't care about the poorer people who have to rely on these khao keng. You know what I mean? So this is something that's kind of, I mean, I know there are people here who say we don't have class issues. I disagree. So I think that that's also something to be mindful of as well. I mean, how ingrained it is, and how, you know, so it's not just like when you go to, you know, supermarket and they give you, it's actually how we eat the food. Yeah. So
Right.
I think
Question.
Yes. Thank you for putting together this really nice event. My name is Ingo Pool. I'm a sustainability entrepreneur. I'm a founder of South Pole Group. South Pole Group, we call ourselves like a sustainability solutions provider. We try to catalyze the renewable energy transformation around the world. We also work on landscapes. Here in Southeast Asia, we are working very much on stopping new coal, like accelerating renewable energy. And other big project is around making mangrove restoration commercially interesting. I have another company called Vapao. It's a sustainable snack food company. It's a startup. But I hate the word sustainability. I think that we let the word come to mean something that has no relevance for normal people. We say sustainability and it sounds like expensive, it sounds like no fun, it sounds like rational. This is not how you motivate people, right? I think what we failed to do, and what I didn't hear enough tonight, was when we talk about our solutions, that we talk about how fun they are, how much better they are, how inspirational, aspirational they are. My favorite example is, of course, Tesla, right? What's fun about Tesla? Not the fact that it's electric, I mean, that's also nice, but that it has like this awesome acceleration, that has a trunk in the front and in the back because there's no combustion engine, that it's quiet, right? That has these cool gimmicks, no? So when we talk about, let's say, renewable energy transformation, we should not talk about climate change, we should talk about it's a solution that turns a consumer into a producer of energy and income. That the solar economy is an economy where the sun shines on all of us and everybody has the possibility now using this cool solar cell thing to convert that sunshine that's for free into an income stream, right? And not pay some stupid utility. Now that's cool, right? Or when we talk about food and when we talk about, like my food company, I don't like to call it sustainable food. I like to call it like scientifically engineered food that's raw, vegan, and that just, basically is super nutritious for your dietary needs, for your concentration. No? That's how you sell. No? That's positive. And I think as a community that works in sustainability, we completely fail to talk about what we do like that. No? Fun, aspirational, beautiful. I think it's more a comment than a question.
Yeah, it is. So, does the panel think they're a bit boring?
I agree about the word, absolutely, but I agree, and I think that the movement has evolved, where, before I left Canada, we weren't talking about CSR anymore. CSR is when I started in 2001. We were talking about sustainable packaging, so the word is still there. We were talking about water technology innovation. We were talking about infrastructure for electric vehicles, zero energy buildings, zero or energy positive buildings. So the thing called sustainability had exploded into all these areas that were further advanced. We definitely have some of that here in Thailand and in Southeast Asia. But I agree that the dark side has never been the way to sell this. And I think, the kind of benefit-led sustainability you're describing is absolutely the way. That said, I think it depends on the audience, right? Because if you're selling this to a manager of a manufacturing plant and there's a cost and benefit and a payback period and he doesn't feel the staff is ready, it's not fun. There's no fun in that. There's aspiration, absolutely, and there's benefits, as you described, becoming a producer where you're selling energy and so on. But I think it really depends on the audience. In terms of Wapao, for sure, that sounds like great messaging. I think probably for Chiva-Som, there's great opportunity and probably that's being realized in terms of how you're communicating that. So I think it absolutely, Ivo, it depends on the audience.
And CSR is dead. You don't.
I mean, in Asia, in developing Asia, it's still. I came here and I pulled out CSR because it is, again, you got to meet people where they are, and it's the language. People understand it for the most part. So I've been using it again since the last 4 years. But I think we'll get to a point where we're moving down that path of sectorally specific innovation. Blockchain, for example, something you're passionate about that we're going to talk about next week is a whole new thing around energy or supply chain. So I think we've got these umbrella terms, CSR, sustainability. They're quite different, complementary but different. But many people, not the average consumer, not necessarily the person selling soup on the street, but many people do understand what they mean as a general sense. And so you've got a common path then go forward together and find your way, as say Kun Krip and I did this evening around energy management.
I appreciate the fun side of it, the fun and aspirational side of it. What we do, in fact, we've just done it this weekend. A few of us on this table here went and ran a marathon. And I think a couple of them never run 42 kilometers in their lives. They made it. You know, I think I'm a runner, and I did it. But while doing it, it was quite painful. But once you've done it, you know, your aspiration has been fulfilled. This is where the fun is, as you say. I mean, it doesn't have to be dull. It doesn't have to be boring. It's a sort of it's a lifestyle goal that you set for yourself that is relevant to you. It is relevant because it's to do with your health, your well-being, and what you know. What else do you need other than that? I mean, you know, the wealth that we seek, the security that we seek, and what does it all mean if you don't have wellness? So, you know, in our culture, whether you call it CSR, sustainability, or whatever, we have this as one of the main themes, that you have to be well. And again, you know, I'd like to kind of go back to the business numbers. We did a study some years back, you know, after we've got people running regularly, exercising every week. I think over a year or 2 year period, we found that the sick leave days went down 50%. Our productivity increased 50%. So how does that translate into the, you know, benefits bottom line? It's obvious. But, you know, when the people doing it are having fun as well. You know, they were all running Lumpini Park and having competitions. You know, those guys are sitting over there. You know, they were competing with me. You know, running around Lumpini Park like 8 times. I mean, that's crazy. It sounds crazy, but it's not really crazy. But at the end of the day, it's to your own benefit. Yeah, it can be fun.
Right. Question?
Yes, hi. I'm Peter Bassett, freelance writer, and full disclosure, I actually contributed to the book that Kun Pink edited. But a couple of comments and a question. Building on what you said, Ingo, about making sustainability fun, I think you can also appeal to people's vanity. For example, L'Oreal and beauty companies should be coming out not just with their anti-aging creams, but they could also be coming out and saying, women, men too, using plastic straws causes wrinkles, so cut that out. You could do a lot along those lines as well. I'm also saddened that there's not a bigger turnout tonight. Clearly sustainability is not that sexy, and I think we're preaching to the converted here. And that's something that we need to get beyond the sustainability community and move it wider and consumerize it and make it easier to do. Plastics has totally jumped into the mainstream consciousness at the moment. And the plastic bags, plastic in the ocean, things like that. It's about getting those touch points. But the question is, how do we keep the ratings agencies honest? Because you know that I mean, have you ever been to a restaurant and you think, how did it get this rating? How did this hotel get this rating? So how do you keep the likes of DJSI, how do you keep them honest rather than from merely handing out accolades and not being held accountable for it? So question to the panel.
Ratings.
So, I don't know, I think, so this is kind of what my little company is trying to do. It's just, I guess, get more information out, especially on the impacts of businesses, just to more clearly connect the dots. But in terms of rating, I think it's a little bit difficult because in Thailand, in Thai we call it Watanabe Uaya. So it's kind of like, it's very hard to translate, but it's like tit for tat culture, you know. So I say nice things about you because I don't want to say bad things about you, and so you can say nice things about me and things like that. So I think there's still, you know, quite a bit of that going on as well. So and I think, yes, there are more, I guess, open comments online, but I think still, in a way, people try to be kind of encouraging, more encouraging than not. So I think this is a bit cultural, but I think that one way is to really get at the actual impact. So I think if consumers, for example, restaurants, I mean, I think one problem I have with a lot of restaurants is that they actually charge the VAT on top of the service charge and things like that, you know. It's kind of become a really bad norm for many places, but not many people know about it because they don't really notice the bill. And so I think that this is something that social media would be a great place to do something like this. But then on the other hand, it's not just a culture, but also in Thailand, there are some, I wouldn't say they're majority of companies, but there are some companies who actually go after people who criticize them. They actually use computer laws to shut them down and to make expensive lawsuits. So I think there's that sense of kind of, well, I'm not going to get in trouble and stuff like that as well, especially when our computer law is quite bad. Anyway, that's another story. But yeah, so I think there are a lot of issues involved of how we can't maybe be so open yet. So I think there has to be kind of coordinated effort of some kind to do it, not just to go it alone.
And also that interesting idea of preaching to the converted. This beautiful book, English, we're in Thailand. Are you going to get it to Thais to read? It's going to be translated.
Yes.
Explain yourself, Pink.
Nick? Well, it is definitely in the process, but we are looking at trying to see it kind of condensed, in a condensed form, and the key lessons and the key how-tos of how to get businesses to do sustainability. But right now, the reception of the book so far has been quite good amongst the corporate world, who are admittedly also our sponsors, but also some people who see it as, oh, you know, this could be some interesting lessons. And one of the things we found is that the comments we received was that, oh, it's good that you've consolidated these different examples for us, you know, to see the types of companies that we can look to, that we could contact if we're interested in this issue. So, and because I think sustainability itself, these companies, okay, disclosure, big companies who have the resources to be in English and to understand these things are also looking to global trends and all of these global issues and engaging with international organizations. So that's why this is in a similar language to that which they are already engaging with. But I absolutely agree that we need to make this issue accessible to the smaller companies and the SMEs and the Thai companies who are trying to understand what this is. And we are in the progress of that.
Good.
I think there's a lot of room for more, examples of small and medium-sized companies who actually pursue sustainability and find a business case benefit. I think that's really important because a lot of, I think, comments we've heard over the past 5 years is that, oh, you know, this is for big company. Of course, you can do it because you're SCG or PTT. You have so much money, you know, and it's not something that we really cannot afford to look at it at all. So there's a big kind of dichotomy. So I think that's, and there are some small companies who have really interesting ideas and they're actually implementing, and it just needs to get the stories out, I guess, more.
Thank you. That sort of leads into what I was going to say. My name is David Kleber, and I'm an entrepreneur trying to provide alternatives for particular one-use plastics, and I can't find them. You know, I want to use it. I carry around my cup all the time because, you know, what else am I going to do? What am I going to do with this now, kind of thing. But and of course, I need to learn in Thai how to say no straw, please. But in the heart of, you know, manufacturing world as we are here in Asia and in Thailand, it's still hard to get product and to put it in front. And I think that it's, you know, all of this is going to be market-driven to an extent where you have to come up with an alternative that's priced at a point where the vendors on the street are going to buy it, much less, you know, other larger corporations. So I guess my question is there a way to incentivize the innovation and development of this kind of stuff within this region? Or, you know, how can we get products to market?
I think it's a great question. Links back to the, I think, banning, you know, single-use plastic. I had jotted down a few steps, I think, in response to that broader one of which would link to this. So, I think there's an opportunity for competition, you know, some kind of prize competition around money or startup support, for example, around alternatives to single-use plastic. So this would meet Pink's criteria of convenience and Ingo's criterion of fun and something that's kind of exciting. And I think these are ways. I have a number of other steps, but that was one of them. Was there should be competitions to provide specifically that alternatives and make it meaningful, make the rewards real. And then when the winners or number 1, number 2, number 3 are chosen, give them some running room in terms of business growth and so on. Government procurement, for instance, or if it's a multinational or a big Thai company sponsoring the competition, they're making a commitment to procure that for the next 3 years, so the business already kind of gets off the ground. These are small ways, I think, that you can actually kind of transform a market. As I said, there are other steps involved, but linked to your idea of alternatives that I think have market value, that are kind of private sector led, I think this has some potential.
When you did your whip around the room to find out who was here, I noticed you didn't ask if there was any media in the room.
Sorry?
Media.
Media.
You forgot about the reporters. But it's quite an interesting point, because do you think that the media is doing its job? Because it's obviously a very vital element in raising issues, focusing, getting campaigns to move. Is the media regionally is challenged very badly. It's very under-resourced at the moment. Do you think the media is letting down the sustainability campaign? And that's open to anybody on the...
I can just give an example from some of my past work, and then I'd love to hear what my Thai colleagues have to say about that. But back in Canada, we were working with consumer goods multinationals, and they felt exactly that the media, especially around bringing, tons of R&D into innovative products that had a clear net environmental benefit. And the media were just not getting it, misrepresenting it, or worse, undermining it. So really misinforming consumers. So they really took it upon themselves, a little bit like what this gentleman said about education and the government, or the businesses lobbying the government. They went and they educated the media. And they spent a lot of resources and time to bring them in and say, and it was an industry thing. It wasn't one company, because there were a number of companies moving in that direction. And it was a concerted effort to say, this is how we develop our products. This is how this product came to be. Here's the measurement, the life cycle analysis, and kind of get them on track. And then, of course, set them free to do their thing. There was no kind of control beyond that, but there was an intervention, let's say, around education.
Good. Right, well, I think we're beginning to wrap it up. People may be interested to know that the club will be having a program on plastics, I think the second Wednesday of June, so that's already scheduled, and we'll have a very good panel of people coming in talking about what's wrong. We all tend to get sort of hung up on plastic bags and bottles and our experiences in 7-Elevens, but it's a big issue. Anyway, I'd like to thank you, Krip, Sarinee, Anthony and Bimsapat for coming. You've kept us going for nearly 2 hours, which is pretty good. It might be a small audience, but it's a good audience, because I've moderated many talks, and I know audiences that are not paying any attention at all, and they're just jabbering around the bar, like a few people are here now. But this was an attentive audience, so I think it was very much appreciated, and thank you very much for coming. $1,000 baht to the back of the room. You get it signed as well.
จะพูดจะแปลนะจริงๆจะแปล